Hey guys, it's Danny. Today I'm gonna tell you about a few observations that I saw in my orchids lately. When I started the orchid hobby, of course, I used to read all sorts of articles and had all sorts of ideas already, but as time went by, some ideas just faded because I observed they were simply not true or not as important as people made them sound. So I'm gonna share with you a few of my observations and some lessons that I learned for the future. Okay, first of all, let's touch base with fertilizer because it has been kind of my main concern lately, but I think I learned a thing or two. So as you know, I used mainly two fertilizers, the rain mix and the MSU that I'm currently using. Both of them have pretty much the same formulation and ratios. And the idea behind these fertilizers is to provide high amounts of nitrogen but also potassium and low amounts of phosphorus, as some studies have discovered that orchids do not really require that much phosphorus. Now you might know the common accepted idea that there are two types of fertilizers, one designed for growth and one designed for blooming. Well, I reached to the conclusion that that stuff absolutely does not matter. Although I used them regularly in the past, now I don't think the so-called bloom boosters have any blooming effect, really, honestly. And I'll show you some examples and I'll tell you why. Now, you might know that a bloom booster contains high amounts of phosphorus because usually in plants, phosphorus is designed to help with flowers and fruit, and also with the production of roots. However, I have been using mainly a low phosphorus fertilizer. The result? Quite a lot of nice blooms. It also happened that this year, this particular orchid produces two flower spikes at the same time. Never happened until now. And overall, the spike in flower production, considering all the stress my orchids have been through, is not really affected by the fertilizer I'm using. Moreover, it's going quite nice considering. So if I were to do this all over again, I would completely disregard the grow fertilizer and the bloom booster. I think a balanced fertilizer such as a 10-10-10 can do the job perfectly fine if you really don't want to hassle with all these ratios and everything. But when it comes to the MSU and the rain mix, I have to say I'm loving the formulation, and I have to agree with the studies, at least so far. Orchids really do not need that much phosphorus, and it seems that the addition of potassium is actually doing quite good. Now, one of the things that phosphorus helps is root production, generally for plants. However, with orchids, the low phosphorus content doesn't really seem to be an issue. Moreover, leaving aside all the root burn that I had so far, I have to agree that both with the rain mix and the MSU, I had the best root production I ever had on my orchids this year. So overall, it's not that orchids don't need phosphorus, but I just do believe that they don't need as much phosphorus as some bloom boosters or other fertilizers provide. They seem to do quite well without it. And this formulation of fertilizer that I use currently is really doing wonders for my orchids, as some of my less stressed and not sick orchids are really starting to grow, producing bigger and bigger growths, unlike the previous years. Also, they are starting to bloom or prepare to bloom like usual. So again, the formulation doesn't seem to affect blooms or root production in any way. Moreover, it really seems to help orchids grow and bounce back. And looking back, at some point, I did read on a forum or an article, I don't remember, that bloom boosters and growth boosters, they really don't matter. Using a high nitrogen fertilizer all year round should be okay for most orchids, except the ones that maybe have a distinct growth pattern, maybe a rest or a dormancy, and so on. Now, of course, there might be exceptions. We'll see how the Dendrobium nobilis do, and also the Kingianum hybrid. But overall, for the usual and common orchids, no, I would not stress myself with boom boosters or anything. If you cannot find the MSU formulation anywhere, I think a balanced fertilizer should do just fine and should be okay for growth and blooming as well. Also, I've reached another conclusion. Catasetums are heavier feeders than I suspected. Sure, I have some blooms and sure they're not dead, but looky here. This cane or pseudobulb created this year is tinier than the previous one. Looking at the other Catasetum type orchids, it's pretty much the same story. If they're not tinier, they're equal. Now, these guys should not be affected by the move all that much, because the first thing that I did when I arrived here was to pot my Catasetum orchids. They were previously not potted, so I didn't damage the root system. What I did do this year was to be very chaotic and kind of scarce with fertilizer when it comes to them. So the result is not so big pseudobulbs. And if you look at pictures on the internet, you will see this particular guy, which is a Millennium Magic, should be humongous. And I have it already for 2 seasons, and it's not supposed to be this way. It should have been quite bigger by now. So I think I under-fertilized this one. And watching videos about them on the internet, particularly weights videos, I discovered kinda what I did wrong. I should have offered some slow-release fertilizer. So what I intend to do next year is to buy some Osmocote and try it out, because next year when they come out of dormancy, I will repot them. It doesn't matter if the roots break, because they do tend to change their roots pretty often. And next year, I will try to add Osmocote, which is a slow-release fertilizer, inside the medium, and also fertilize with my current MSU, and see if that makes any difference. I have a funny suspicion it will. And it only took me 2 or 3 years to figure this out. But as they say, better late than never. I also refined a bit my idea of how disease and pathogens transmit from one plant to another. And I think the main vector for this is moisture. Whether we don't sterilize our cutting tools and cut into the orchid into good tissue, whether we share water or splash water everywhere, I think the main vector of transmitting a lot of pathogens, bacterial infections and fungal infections is water. So many years my plants have touched each other because in my balcony stuff were crowded. I touched one leaf and then touched another leaf, and I really didn't have all that much trouble. This year I made the mistake to put my plants on the same tarp while I was waiting for this rames to arrive. And of course I watered them or I misted them, and inevitably that water splashed around and made it so pathogens transmitted from one plant to another. And now I think I discovered about 20 orchids infested with Fusarium, orchids that did very well in the past, and all of a sudden they were not doing so well. So from now on, I think I will be super careful with water splashing and sharing and all of that, because I just think this is the sure way to transmit disease between orchids. If one leaf touches a little bit the other leaf, usually it's okay. As long as orchids don't share sap and stuff like that, I think it's pretty much okay. So I will just stop worrying about that and focus on a better water management and splashing water and all of that. Of course, I do not share water and I sterilize my cutting tools, but if ever I will ever be in the position to place my orchids on the same tarp, I will definitely remember this moment and I will not do the same mistake again. So alrighty guys, this is it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to rate this video below if you did enjoy it and you learned something new, and also subscribe for more orchid videos on a daily basis. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye. Since I lost my cucullata, there has been a gap in my heart for brassavolas, and I thought my little stars will not bloom this year. But I think it will. I think this is a flower spike poking through the sheath, and I have 3 more new growths this year. So this makes getting over the loss quite a lot better.